and Shayna Baszler. No! And Nia Jax slips.
It happened again to Nia.
Now another episode of Raw has come and gone, with fans wondering what happened to a show that was once must-see television. Join us now as Wrestlelamia looks at why Raw is failing and losing tons of viewers. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos, and follow us on Facebook for exclusive lists.
Rotten Tomatoes!
Got flying tomatoes.
This is going to get a 98% on the Rotten Tomato meter.
Oh, they're organic.
Wow.
Number 1. Disappearing wrestlers. Wrestlers will get hurt, and the pandemic has only made things worse as WWE superstars disappear for weeks or even months at a time. However, the WWE does nothing to explain where its missing stars are, whether it's mid-card acts like Ricochet, who thankfully is back, or upper-card stars like Keith Lee. The Limitless One has been missing in action since before last February's Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, and while WWE may have a good reason for keeping him off television, why not at least let fans know how he is, rather than leading to wild speculation? If a fan likes a wrestler and enjoys watching them every week, the WWE should let them know why they haven't been on television for weeks. The reality though is that WWE just doesn't care.
When I wasn't on WrestleMania, I wasn't welcomed at WrestleMania.
Whether it's reforming a team like the Riot Squad only to shoot them into the Phantom Zone, or splitting up Retribution with the majority of faction members vanishing into thin air. Need we even bring up vanishing storylines like Raw Underground? Number 2, is there even a tag division? Does Raw even have a tag team division at this stage? A rumor has it that the Red Brand actually has a tag team championship, but it's been a long time since we've seen AJ Styles and Omos in action, let alone defending the tag team titles.
You won one match, and you thought you earned yourself a right to take a month off, going on vacation, traveling the world, and not coming to work.
As bad as that is, the WWE continues breaking up tag teams, with former champion Cedric Alexander and Shelton Benjamin splitting, while the New Day seems more focused on singles matches. The Viking Raiders are out there somewhere, but they may as well try mini-golf and bowling contests until the WWE figures out what to do with them. Throw in the unlikely team of Randy Orton and Riddle, one which seems destined to split, and it's clear WWE couldn't care less about Raw's tag team stars unless it's to break up a team with no long-term plans for the wrestlers. Number 3, an atrociously booked women's division. Now, anyone who watches our weekly Raw videos featuring the good, the bad and the downright ugly knows that the women's division often finds itself ranked in the bad section, as the WWE has put no effort into booking its women ever since Becky Lynch's maternity leave. Like every category on the list, the problem isn't with the talent, but with the booking. Asuka seems strong enough to lead the Red Brand, but the WWE made her Raw Championship an afterthought, using her as a pawn in the Greater Bayley vs Sasha Banks program and ignoring the rest of the stars Raw has. The WWE missed out on the opportunity to push both Rhea Ripley and Shayna Baszler on Raw, with Ripley sticking on NXT and Baszler going from being portrayed as a monster heel to playing second banana in a team with Nia Jax. At least they managed to rectify Rhea Ripley by putting the strap on her, but recent decisions have made her look like an idiot, like in the Beat the Clock challenge match. Number 4, Wrestle, Rematch, Repeat. The WWE's obsession with rematches is well known, and as we've discussed in the past, the practice dates back to the Attitude Era, when the WWE would air a match on pay-per-view and air a rematch the next night on Raw. That doesn't mean it's a good idea though, and the WWE has only worsened things by throwing out rematches with no purpose other than to kill time. The recent rash of replays between Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander proved this point, as they put no effort into the matches. For example, why not change things up by throwing in a stipulation to the match or making it a tag team match instead of a singles one? Another thing to consider with rematches is how about changing up the winner of the match? Now, although 50-50 booking is bad, having a wrestler lose match after match to the same opponent makes little sense, especially if WWE wants to elevate one or both wrestlers. Fans will likely recall the feud between Murphy and Aleister Black that gave fans a chance to see both superstars throw down in some hard-hitting matches. Unfortunately, WWE had Murphy lose match after match, giving fans little reason to get behind Murphy and doing little more than to care about the Dutch Destroyer. There's a right way to do rematches and a wrong way to do them. Guess which way the WWE is doing them. Number 5, an ugly undercard. Now you guys know the WWE isn't lacking in talent. Despite a number of releases in 2020 and 2021, the company still boasts one of the strongest rosters in the wrestling industry. However, why isn't the WWE taking its undercard talent on Raw such as Ricochet, Humberto Carrillo, Cedric Alexander and Angel Garza and building them up into something more than surprise guests from main event? This applies to the women's division too, but since we've already discussed it, we won't repeat the many women who haven't been given a chance to break out. Fans and observers alike have pointed out how so many of the WWE's main eventers are 40 years old or over. There's nothing inherently wrong with this, but at some point the younger stars will have to step in, something they can't do as long as they wallow in obscurity on the undercard. Number 6. Cut and paste booking. It was once said that only Nixon could go to China, so perhaps it's only appropriate that only Vince Russo could point out Raw's flaws.
The only reason I'm watching Raw, to be honest with you, is because I get literally paid to watch Raw and critique it.
And one of Russo's constant criticisms of the Red brand, and no, we're not suggesting that WWE bring back wrestling's original bro, is what he describes as cut and paste booking. The idea that storylines are easily interchangeable and that match finishes are as easy as taking the script from one show and recycling it the next week with some minor changes. Did Randy Orton win with a roll-up last week? Well, why not have Kofi Kingston win with a roll-up this week? Again, while there's nothing wrong with using ideas that have worked in the past, the WWE takes an idea that works and recycles it straight into the ground. Exhibit A is the tired trope of two rivals forming a tag team as the announcers wonder how long can they coexist. Bianca Belair and Sasha Banks are recent examples, as the then SmackDown Women's Champion Sasha Banks joined forces with the #1 contender Bianca Belair in a pointless bid to win the Women's Tag Team Championship, as if anyone cares about that belt right now. This might have been a good idea if the WWE hadn't used it with Braun Strowman and Otis in 2020 or Seth Rollins and Braun Strowman in 2019. Raw got in on the fun this year too, as Braun Strowman and Drew McIntyre formed an uneasy alliance. And one of the scariest examples occurred a few weeks back when the WWE ran the same matches 2 weeks in a row. On the 19th April, Drew McIntyre wrestled Mason T-Bar, with the strongman getting disqualified for double teaming Drew. Braun then ran in for the save and the two teamed to battle Mason T-Bar, losing by DQ. The next week, Braun Strowman wrestled Mason T-Bar, losing by disqualification when the tag team were disqualified. This time, Drew McIntyre ran in for the save and a rematch was scheduled right after, with Mason T-Bar winning by DQ over Strowman and McIntyre. While the purpose of the 4 matches seemed to be to advance the rivalry between Drew and Braun while showing their inability to coexist, its formulaic failings illustrate the WWE's inability to grasp changing things up. Number 7. No build-up for matches. How important are matches in WWE? Well, apparently not very important when you look at the big picture. We've seen that wrestlers are booked into endless rematches, but the matches seem to come out of nowhere with no build-up. Perhaps the WWE doesn't want to announce the same match they've had for the last 3 weeks, but why not try to build it up with a hype video to make it seem extra special and throw in an interview so wrestlers can explain why it's so important that they're getting their hands on their opponent? If wrestlers don't have any interest in matches, why should the fans? Number 8. The WWE mishandles its 3 hours.
Starting tonight, the 3rd hour of Raw each and every week is about to get downright mean and nasty.
Fans have been complaining for years that Raw's 3-hour format is just too much wrestling, but the reality is that the 3rd hour isn't going anywhere as long as the USA Network continues to dish out mucho dinero for it. While 3 hours may seem like a long time, it's more a case of utilizing the time properly. Raw could become destination television as the WWE mixes up interviews, backstage segments, hype videos and must-see matches throughout the 3 hours, much as it does with pay-per-views. The days when weekly television served as a commercial for pay-per-views is long gone, and the WWE derives a significant amount of revenue from its content deals. With that in mind, why not make its television shows into events instead of bore fests? As we've shown, the WWE has an underutilized women's division, tag division and undercard. Give time to all 3 areas while using uppercard to main eventers to help build them up, much like the WWE used to do during the Attitude and Ruthless Aggression era. A mid-card star doesn't even need to get over against the main eventer, but as SmackDown has shown with Roman Reigns, it's possible to elevate undercard wrestlers by having them put in strong showings against the brand's top star, even if they lose. Number 9. The worst announcing since Vince McMahon. Raw's announcing has been hit and miss for years, but it hasn't been this bad since the days when Vince McMahon called the matches and did his best to hide the fact that he owned the WWF. Raw's biggest problem seems to be finding an announce crew with both a good play-by-play person and a good color commentator. Samoa Joe was good on color, but the WWE made the baffling decision to get rid of him. The recent decision to bring in non-wrestling announcer Adnan Virk led to criticisms as Virk adjusted to calling wrestling. Although Virk was nowhere near as bad as former announcer Mike Adamle, he didn't stick around, making fans wonder what the purpose was for bringing in a non-wrestling announcer. The reason seems to be Vince McMahon's well-known preference for announcers from the sports world, such as a time he tried to woo former UFC announcer Mike Goldberg, or his more recent success in bringing in Pat McAfee, and the decision to replace Virk with former UFC and Bellator play-by-play man Jimmy Smith. And number 10, boring backstage segments. Speaking of interviews, the WWE's backstage segments have sunk to new lows, not only with intelligence-insulting segments, but a complete lack of interesting personalities to interview superstars and interact with them. Raw lost big when Charlie Caruso left the company, as she actually seemed interested in the interviews and reacted to the wrestlers' responses. Caruso isn't indispensable, but the WWE hasn't tried hard with the backstage interviews they've brought in since.
Are we not going to talk about that at all? That's not how we do it here, Kevin. You should learn this. Anyway, I'm going to talk about it.
A good backstage interview makes a talk segment seem a bit more special, while anything less is a model holding a microphone. But there you have it, guys. Reasons why Raw is failing and losing tons of viewers. Do you guys agree with these? What could you do to make Raw better? Let us know in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.